pleased to have Representative Matt Caldwell from Lehigh Acres to talk on South Florida water challenges. I see from Matt's background that he too is a seventh-generation Florida native, and I see Allison and Matt are together. Maybe you're related somewhere. Matt received his Bachelor of Arts in History from Florida Gulf Coast University. He then went on to his career as a real estate appraiser with Maxwell and Hendry Valuation Services in Fort Myers. He's attained the highest state certification in his field and is qualified as an expert witness in multiple states and in the federal courts. He is the chair of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Subcommittee. He also serves on the Finance and Tax Subcommittee, Government Operations Subcommittee, Insurance and Banking Subcommittee, the Select Committee on Redistricting, and the State Affairs Committee. Representative Caldwell, South Florida water challenges.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. I always listen to those intros and think, man, that's a pretty swell guy. I wish I'd meet him someday. That does not feel like me. And of course, Doug Mann and I were talking about Allison and I sharing that distinction, seventh generation Floridian. And I said, well, I should probably mention my daughter, of course, then would be the eighth generation through my side. But my wife actually is of Mexican ancestry, so Ava would be something like a 45th generation Native American. So kudos to y'all if you can beat that one. I've laid down the gauntlet. Last year I came and talked to you about some of the challenges we face on a broader perspective. And if you recall, I framed it using one of the 7 habits of highly effective people that my wife uses in her classroom. If you go in her classroom, you'll see 7 little posters across the top trying to train the kids in how to be effective and stay on task. And last year's was talking about beginning with the end in mind. And I didn't set out last year's with the idea that I'm going to come back this year and teach you another habit when it comes to Everglades policy or South Florida issues. But something struck me, and I thought it'd be best to share what's kind of been weighing on my heart when we talk about these challenges. But last year was beginning with the end in mind, and the frame there was one of the challenges I saw at the time, and I think is continual, is understanding what each of our individual visions is for the end, for success. When we're done with, say, for example, a comprehensive Everglades restoration project, and we spent $10 billion, what that looks like in each of our minds really influences the way we support or oppose policy decisions. And so getting on the same page, as it were, is really critical to that. And you just heard Senator Negron kind of go through a quick overview of what we as a legislature prioritized through our budget last year. There are so many projects we have to deal with, and so many different pieces to the puzzle, so many different stakeholders we have to worry about. When you talked about what does that picture look like and the things that just can't be fixed, like the transverse glades that are gone. Miami River is not going to turn back into what it used to be. Or the Caloosahatchee and the way we've permanently altered the mix between the aquifer and the groundwater by digging it so deep. Things that just can't be undone. Or you talk about where the people live today. So there's farmers south of the lake, but not just the farmers, but also the 100,000 people that work and rely on that economy. They live in the shadow of a dike that's in very, very poor shape and leaves them at risk long term. Or even the 3 million people, and this is a group I keep harping on because I don't think it gets talked about in the policy discussion, but it's important. All of those people that live from Wellington to Miami Lakes to Homestead, that live west of I-95, about 3 million of them live in the Everglades. They live where there used to be a shallow river flowing out to the Florida Keys. And any solution that deals with moving water south has to appreciate that land is gone. Just like the land where the farms are is gone, so is the land where those 3 million people live gone when it comes to moving water south. But that's more of the end in mind, and today I thought I would change the focus a little bit to one of those other topics, which is seeking first to understand and then be understood. And the understanding part is really key, I think, to this entire process. It's key to the legislative process. If you go in and just demand that your bill pass, I can assure you that's a pretty good way to not have it get moving along. You have to understand the motivations for your colleagues, for each other. It's just the nature of politics. And when I thought about South Florida challenges, I thought there'll probably be a lot of people talking about the projects or the amount of water we have to move or the obstacles. I covered a couple of those just a second ago. But I think the real challenge that we deal with, and we've been dealing with it for forever, is the politics itself and the drive and the need to understand each other better. So let me give you some frame of reference. I just turned 33 years old. Everyone's a product of their own experience, the way they view the world. So the world I've known since 1981 is one where environmentalists and farmers and people in South Florida are all just yelling at each other, really yelling past each other about how we need to save the Everglades. And for me, for somebody that came of age and was getting involved politically just 10 years ago, those fights seem irrelevant to me. It's like listening to two parents who've been divorced for 30 years still arguing with each other. We're not going to make any progress rehashing the same arguments, yelling past each other. Let's get some projects done. I steal the line from Adam Putnam about ribbon cuttings instead of groundbreakings, actually getting something done in this plan that we've laid out. But there's some obstacles to that get to the thing about understanding. I doubt any of you expected to come today and hear somebody talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But it's being in the news about a month ago really made me think about something we struggle with here. And staying out of the politics of which side's right or wrong, there is a fundamental difference in that argument that can't be mediated away. And it's the feeling on one side that the other does not have the right to exist. Egypt was able to make a peace treaty because they eliminated that concern from their list of things they wanted to work out between the two of them. And as long as one side thinks the other doesn't have a right to exist, there's really no way to negotiate that out. And I do think we've made a lot of great progress in the last few years when we passed the Everglades bill renewal. We had very high-profile groups as a part of that, the Everglades Foundation and Audubon of Florida, who were very much invested in moving the ball forward and not arguing past each other just for the sake of arguing. But there are other groups who are very vocal and very involved who fundamentally reject the right of some of the people in the Everglades system to exist. They are just not going to be satisfied as long as their opponents in their mind exist at all in the Everglades ecosystem. And from a public policymaker standpoint, that's just an unrealistic goal that I can't carry out and mediate. That's setting yourself up for failure if that's the way you feel about the challenges. Another challenge that's more real, but really twofold, one's about language, one's about the policymaking decision, is our changing climate. Bet you also didn't expect somebody to talk about changing climate, particularly a Republican member of the legislature. But I want to make a distinction first. I'm not talking about climate change, that capital letter phrase that I put in air quotes, because that's where the real misunderstanding I see happen today, particularly between the political parties, between the press and their interaction with that issue. Not trying to pick a fight with the press, they buy ink by the barrel, you know the adage. But as they do have a role in informing the discussions, it's important that we understand what the language means when you use that capital letter climate change phrase. And we got to get past that to really deal with the question of a changing climate. So what do I mean by that capital letter phrase? Well, if you're a conservative, I'm just going to speak from that perspective. If somebody comes up and says, do you believe in redistribution of wealth and socialism? And I answer no, that doesn't make the paper. But if I feel like the capital letter climate change phrase means those two things and I say no, I'm suddenly a rabid anti-science crazy nut. That's not really the question I'm trying to answer, and I don't think it's productive for our conversation. What is productive is the lesson I try to teach my daughter each year when she comes up to Tallahassee. During their spring break, we always schedule for Yvonne and Ava to come up, and I make a point each year to walk down the hill, if you haven't been, to the Museum of Natural History. It's just a block and a half down the hill towards the university from the Capitol. And there's a lot of great stuff. Those 7 generations I can walk through and say, hey, this is where your family was here. And it's a great object lesson for that period. But before you get to modern history, you go through the prehistory section. When you first walk through the door, there's a giant armadillo on the right. There's the big mastodon skeleton from Wakulla Springs. But there's a little hands-on display right there. You can push a lever up, and you push a lever down. And the water inside the display covers up the peninsula of Florida and then goes off the peninsula of Florida. And it teaches the lesson that the water sometimes covers over everything in the past, and sometimes it hasn't. And so if I get asked, do I believe that climate changes? It absolutely does. There's no way I can look at the historical record that we present in our Natural History Museum in Tallahassee and come to any other conclusion. The question becomes for policymakers, what do you do with that? What do I do with that information? This is, I think, the next pressing challenge. The two parties yelled past each other. They did the best they could. They've negotiated a compromise in the Everglades with the SERP program. It's passed. It's $10 billion. We're building the projects. Everybody's heard about the fact the state's taken the lead in actually building projects, and we already poo-pooed on the Corps earlier. I think we've done enough of that. But the next phase is, what if the climate is changing, and not really if, it does, how is it, and what is it, and what does that mean to $10 billion worth of investment? The best I can tell, for certainty's sake, is that the sea level has risen about a foot over the last 100 years. Has it been doing that naturally since the last time it exposed everywhere that each one of us live? Unless you live in Lake Wales or Sebring, every single one of us lives in a place that was underwater at some point. That's why there's a limestone shelf. That's why you have the beaches you have, the way it's shaped. So being able to talk about this in a realistic way, I think, is the next big challenge. The next challenge in understanding each other and understanding what it is we're talking about when we're looking at policymaking decisions. That's a big deal. I mean, this is, again, $10 billion we have committed ourselves to over the next however many years it's going to take us to really complete it. And is that the best decision to be making if things are changing around us, is a real valid policy question. And then I think to myself, how do I deal with that? And these are South Florida challenges because they're questions I get asked. I get asked by my newspaper. I get asked by my constituents. What am I going to do about this? And my response is, I don't have an answer to that. The honest answer, and you rarely get that, I think, from most politicians, the honest answer is I don't have a solution for that, because I can't tell you if it's just going to happen as a matter of course, in which case there is no public policy decision. Just prepare for it. Or is there actually something going on that we're impacting? I know that, I brought with me the paper that I read the other day. It's been about 3 weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal. One of the scientists that works for the Obama administration, or did in the first term, with his client, Science is Not Settled article. It's a great article if you've not read it, discussing the weak points and the strong points and what we understand. And I think the lesson to take away when we're talking about this issue is the one I think we all learned when we look at how the Corps treated their drainage project in the first place. You go back and look at those videos from the 1950s. I remember one specifically where the very wise and intelligent voice told the school children, once the Corps is done with this project, we will be able to push back the sea with our power and over nature. We'll be able to decide when the tide comes in and goes out. Hubris, pure and simple, and we chuckle about that. But the fact is, we really aren't that much wiser today than we were 50 years ago or 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. We're just struggling to make sense of what little stuff, what little data we understand, and make public policy decisions based upon what we understand and what the people who elect us want us to do. Politics change, to bring it home. The politics being the thing that we need to improve, the understanding, they change. I found it a little bit amusing. If you follow me on Twitter, I retweeted an article from my hometown newspaper, the News Press. They're celebrating their 130th year of publication, and they're every day publishing a different set of old headlines, starting from 1880s through to today when they get wrapped up. And there was a headline from September of 1905, and in big bold letters across the top of it, it said, "Drain the Everglades," say Lee County and DeSoto County property residents. And it was a very lengthy article about how this was the way for the future. This is the way that would make us prosperous. This is the public policy decision that smart people, that right people want done. And I only bring that up to note how quickly things change, how difficult it is when you look at the issues from a public policymaker perspective. What's the right decision? And all I can say is that the solution to all of our challenges are seeking to understand. You have to understand each other before you can go out and try to make yourself understood, because I may be saying A and you hear B, and then we're not getting anywhere. And so that, if you're asking me what is the South Florida challenge, more than the actual construction of projects, or more than are we going to move water here, move water there, it's making sure that we take the time to understand each other and how we arrive at the public policy decisions we've been making. So there's my 5 minutes on South Florida's challenges. And I could expect that either you have no questions or plenty, but John will field them nonetheless. Thank you very much.